Welcome to Gaily Inspiration with Godly and Gay, the podcast where we uplift and inspire the LGBTQ plus community and our allies. I'm Candace Hardnett, your host, and I'm looking forward to being an inspiration and being inspired by you. Let's go. Hello, listeners. I am so excited. Today, I am joined by Rocky Roggio of the 1946, the movie. I am so excited to have you join us today, Rocky. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you so much for having me.
Awesome. Well, welcome to Gaily Inspiration. This is the podcast where we uplift and we motivate the LGBTQ community. And I'm so excited about what you have going on and just to share this with our listeners today, because I think that they will be as blessed as I am, because I am super stoked. I'm excited about the movie. But before we go into the movie, I want to hear about you a little bit. Can you tell me a little bit about your life, specifically about your faith and sexuality?
Sure. So, my life, I would say, is pretty typical of someone who grew up in an evangelical Christian home. My dad's a pastor. My mom's a nurse. I've got three sisters, and we grew up in that evangelical world of prayers before meals and Wednesday night Bible study and reading the Bible at the table, so I grew up really in that experience where we are Christian and this is what we believe, and everything else really outside of what I understood or what I knew was almost like being outside of God. And it was presented to me in such a way, like how blessed are we to have this faith kind of thing. But it was a fun growing up, as much as, you can have with three sisters, but with the faith part of it, I always had a problem responding to the doctrine that I was being presented, because within that evangelical reality, I also understood and was taught at a young age that even within Christianity, there are certain branches of Christianity that do it better or do it right. And we were the ones that were doing it right. And all of these other denominations were doing it wrong. And I would hear that from other congregations too. And that was my first kind of red flag that something was off. And so I asked questions. And because I asked questions, I was labeled as the troublemaker, as you can imagine. So then I realized I was same-sex attracted, which I really didn't know what that was. I was probably about 5 years old when I realized there was something different about me. Right. And the first thing that I realized is I had to keep it a secret. I couldn't tell anybody that I had this attraction, and I had no one to confess it to or talk with about it. And so that added an extra layer of confusion for me. And
Right.
Yeah, so I don't know. It was hard for me then to identify fully with what I was being taught, who I felt that I was inside, and then different rhetoric that we hear as LGBTQ people growing up in those spaces about homosexuals or gay people, So.
Right.
So yeah, that's a little bit about my childhood, and then I guess my faith start journey. I don't know where we can maybe journey on from there, because there's so many, I'm sure my story sounds familiar. There's a lot of people who,
absolutely,
how about you?
Yeah, I'm sure that resonates with a lot of people. My faith story is, I was raised in the church, Baptist, kind of similar in the sense that people that are Baptist are that we're the right ones, we do things right. And we didn't really associate. And I wondered why we didn't associate with some of the other churches in the neighborhood. And that always baffled me, because I didn't understand denominations. I didn't come out until later. And so I didn't have to struggle. And surprisingly, and I think thankfully, we didn't talk about sexuality in the church that I'm from. So right. I didn't have that whole dynamic, and I wasn't Christian all my life. And so I ended up leaving the faith. And then I came out after leaving the faith. I was 12 when I left the faith, and I came out at 16. So I didn't have the pushback from the church then at all, which made it a whole lot easier to come out. I tell you that.
Yeah.
But I understood it, and I understand it now from that perspective. But tell me, so your dad is a pastor.
Yeah. Yeah.
What was coming out like for you?
Yeah, well, so I didn't really have a coming out. I would say I was found out. Um, because I had to keep it a secret, the only thing that I could do is really the only way that I had to confess was to keep it to myself in a diary. So I started a diary and I started to keep all of my secrets in that diary. And when you're same-sex attracted and you're going through puberty and you start having crushes, I definitely wear my heart on my sleeve, and I think that people could tell, I was getting teased by my peers a lot. And I think it trickled down to my parents that I might have this problem. And so my father took it upon himself to invade my privacy and read my diary. And that was, as you can imagine, quite traumatic. And that's how I was found out. He confronted me on it. And so I was pretty much caught off guard. And in that moment, my reaction was defensive, as you can imagine. But then my dad
Absolutely.
took it to the next level and wrote me a typed 10-page letter telling me why the road I'm going on is the wrong road, and listed every clobber passage that condemns LGBTQ people. So,
Oh my
uh,
goodness.
yeah, so I left home, and it's been a rocky 20 years of trying to figure out how to navigate their reality, my parents, and some of my sisters who are very much in that evangelical bubble and believe the one man, one woman is the way, period, for everyone. And so, and for me, for someone who is just same sex attracted, and you can speak from experience on this, like, we haven't done anything wrong,
Right.
so to feel and be condemned by the people that love and are supposed to love you the most and that you love the most, it's just a hard space to be in for both parties. So yeah, so within that 20 years, there's been more story, of what we do with the space. But yeah, that was my coming out experience. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, let me ask you this. I know that letter had to have been devastating for you. What's your relationship with your father now?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I have a pretty good relationship with my parents now and my siblings, although they would still believe a little bit differently than what they would have believed 20 years ago, because 20 years ago when my dad wrote the letter, he still was on the mindset that homosexuals will not inherit the kingdom of God, which is the thesis of our film, the First Corinthians verse. That's the
Right.
mother verse. And so homosexuals will not enter the kingdom of God. And he was just fearful, really honestly, just coming from a place of what he thought and what is love to him, and was scared for my eternal soul. Um, and so, as we both have gone through and navigated this experience where I know I haven't done anything wrong, he's coming from a genuine place where he just wants to protect me. And
Mhm.
he's reading, it says homosexuals will not inherit the kingdom of God. Now he would say that being same sex attracted is different. And so he's maybe more of a side B. But as we've learned, which is, side A would be fully affirming, you affirm your sexual orientation and identity, and you can be in relationship with someone of the same sex, where side B would be you can call yourself gay and identify as being gay, but your only options would be celibacy or marrying someone of the opposite sex, which is what they would
Right.
call the traditional view of marriage or the biblical view of marriage. But as we've been navigating our differences on this polar reality, the only thing that we can really do is be in relationship with one another, because we're not trying to hurt each other, so at least I've got that support where my parents want to love me and they still have hope that I'm going to change. I mean, that's just not going to happen. So as they're being an influence to me, I'm being an influence to them, and we've afforded each other that space. It's not easy. It's still tricky, and it's also, when you have to hide a part of yourself, and I still am not able to share my full authentic self with my family. So that's really difficult. But at the end of the
Right.
day, I would say that if we can learn to forgive people who have hurt us, and we can, again, lead with love and understand the root of it, then maybe we can start to build some sort of foundation that leads us to a growth in our relationship. So that's all I can
Absolutely.
do. It's not easy.
Yeah, I can imagine. Do you have any advice that you would offer to someone who may be listening to this right now and they may be in a similar situation? Because not everyone can do what you're doing. I know
Right.
you have to know your relationship is quite unique. A lot of people, they would leave or not want anything to do with their parents or family member that's not affirming. So, do you have any advice for a non-affirming, for someone who is gay who has to deal with or wants to have a relationship with someone who's non-affirming?
So my advice would be, do it when and if and only if you're ready and if it's healthy for you. Because again, it's not easy, and it does weigh on you, especially and if you can't be fully open. And my parents would allow someone to come over. They wouldn't allow them to spend the night, or, things like that. Um, but I think the best advice I can give is, you know, make sure that you have a good support community that you can talk to outside of that family relationship. Try not to nudge them too much that it makes anyone in the room uncomfortable, but still be strong in who you are. Like, there's a balance in that. So, and I think that I just might have also a fortunate situation where my parents are able to do the same. So every story is different. I don't know what would be the right advice. Do you have any advice, Pastor? I'm sure you might have some. You've thought of this, maybe you can help me out with some of this.
Well, no, I honestly, because like you just said, everyone's situation is different and every person is an individual. And I know that some people don't have the capacity or have the bandwidth to deal with a non-affirming family member. And it's easier for them to just go away and just find chosen family to replace those that, and even though it hurts, replace those that are so damaging, because the toll of it all becomes very damaging to them. Where some people, like yourself, are like, okay, but the relationship is more important. And I think I've heard you say before that you even kind of pity your father and other family members because they're victims just like you are of bad
Right.
theology. And I think that's an excellent way to look at it, honestly.
Yeah, so you're right in that. And that is a really good point. If we can empathize and come from that place of love and understanding that our oppressors or our loved ones are victims of bad theology, just like we are. And so if we can just come from that place too, maybe we can have grace, again, empathy to just, show up and be in the room, because it's better than not being in the room. Because your chosen family is great and they're lovely and they're supportive, but it's just not the same. And so if you can make it work and it's worth it to you, I would say give it another try, even if it takes 10 years, 20 years, but maybe don't take too long, because you never know how much time we have here. So,
Yeah. Yeah, I always say to people, and about more than just sexuality, about a number of different things. People that have to navigate narcissistic parents, for instance, or abusive parents in
sure.
any way, just make sure that the decision that you're making is one that you can live with if they're no longer here. That on the day, because the chances are parents are going to leave before we do. And
Right.
so make sure that the decisions that you're making are decisions that you can live with once they're gone. And if you can't live with that decision, then do something now that you can put yourself in the shoe that the shoes that you will be wearing in 20 years are these shoes that you can live with for the rest of your life. If so, carry on. If
Yeah.
not, seek some help and perhaps build something different.
Right. Right. Definitely seek the help. Definitely build. That's all great advice for sure. For sure. So, yeah, but my dad is in the movie and he is still very side X. So he mentioned side A, side B, side X would be you can't even call yourself gay,
Uh,
and you better straighten up. Literally, I guess,
right.
So, and you can be saved. And there's but he did switch from side X to side B a little bit, but he agreed to be in the film. We're showing his authentic voice. We're very grateful that he is in the film. And as I was talking about earlier, these notes of love and trying to understand that we're not looking to hurt each other. We just have a very different point of view.
Mm-hmm.
So forgiveness does play into this as well. If we can just learn to forgive and learn to respect as much as we can, that will help in this. So yeah, he's in the film, and he's not going to budge. You've seen the film, actually. What do you think?
I have. I love it. And
Great.
I was so stoked to be able to watch it. And I didn't know if it was appropriate to be like, I've seen it and I love it. You guys are gonna love it too. Wait till it comes out. But yeah, I've seen your father. He's a little scary. I'll be honest. He's a little scary. But at the end of the day, I think it says a lot about his character and his love for you. To do some of the things that he did. Can you tell us a little bit about, like, if you don't mind, just kind of a little teaser about some of his parts in the movie?
Sure. So we first learn of my dad when he's challenging Kathy and Ed at a conference, and they're talking about First Corinthians, the mistranslation in the RSV, the whole theme of the movie, really. And so I took my dad to this conference in 2018 as I was working on challenging him and trying to find common ground with my non-affirming parents on this affirming theology. So I took him to this conference, and he and I had definitely a different experience while sitting in this room. I was sitting in that conference, and Kathy and Ed, like, I already knew about Kathy's work, but I didn't know about the RSV work that they were doing. And this 1946 mistranslation, and the young man who wrote the letter, and he's alive, So I was sitting at this
Yeah.
conference, and I was like, I have to tell this story. Like, this is an incredible story. And this one piece of evidence, these letters that they found at Yale University, give us a tangible piece of evidence for a real conversation to base around this issue that's been going on for so many years. But my
Mm-hmm.
dad had a very different experience sitting in that conference. So we have him confronting Kathy and Ed and asking, basically, can you show me in the Bible one example of any passage that affirms same-sex relationships in any way, And Kathy's like, no, he's like, because there are none. And so that's how you meet my dad. And then we see a little bit of the history of the struggle that we've had, which I won't give too many of the secrets away of some of the stuff that's happened. But then at the end of the movie, we see him challenging everyone again. We bring him to the Reformation Project, which actually you spoke at. So he did hear
I
you
did.
speak live. Yeah, that was great. And he
Was he
got to
there?
meet,
He heard me?
he did. Yep, he was going.
Wow.
He went to all of the main stage events, although he didn't really participate. He wasn't clapping or worshiping in any way, but he was definitely,
Not even
um,
during the worship. I mean, we're worshiping God.
yeah, yeah.
Like he didn't even
No,
like the urge to lift a hand or anything.
no, he couldn't go there. He couldn't go there, but that's okay. He was in the room. He was
Yeah.
in the room, and so he got to meet Matthew Vines and Justin Lee and see Kathy Annette again and hear Cheryl Anderson, who's in our movie, Dr. Anderson. Yep. And be challenged by these things and then show us and tell us again at the end of the movie that we've done a great presentation, but he stands where he stands. And we shake hands and we talk about forgiveness and we go out to lunch, and it's the best that we can do. So hopefully our representation of our love for each other and in trying to at least engage in this conversation will set an example for other people who are in this reality where our loved ones we're so polarized.
Right.
And how can we at least get in the room together and make the most of it? So yeah, we're very grateful to have him in the movie, and that's all I'll tell you.
Awesome. Sounds good. And so you did mention that your father believes in conversion therapy, believes that people can change. I don't know if I don't want you to necessarily speak for him as far as some type of organization or anything like that. Is he aware of that you know of the harm that conversion therapy can and does to people that are same gender loving?
So I think he has, as he's on this journey, probably has and understands that organizations like Exodus have caused harm. Now, he still does believe, I think, that conversion therapy is possible and counseling is a part of this. I think the language has changed and he would change with the language. But it's still conversion therapy, He
Mm-hmm.
mentioned in one of his sermons recently and celebrated the group called Revoice. Now, Revoice is a group of gay identifying Christians who still believe in the traditional view of marriage. So they would be side B celibate or side B get into a mixed orientation marriage. And
Mm-hmm.
as he's learning, he, of course, as a evangelical coming from a side X reality, would celebrate that. At least they're understanding the biblical one man, one woman doctrine.
Mm-hmm.
I have a different opinion about that, but side B, honestly, this is a hard conversation, and there's been so much misinformation just around human sexuality in general, that
Mm-hmm.
wherever you are in this journey, we welcome you and we want to, walk with you as much as we can. And hopefully what we're trying to do in the film is provide, and what Kathy Bullock is doing with Ed Oxford in the book that they're writing, How the Bible Became Anti-Gay, Forging a Sacred Weapon. Our job is just to provide good information, backed up, cited all in the book, so that people can take the information and make the decisions for themselves. And that's why we have someone like my dad in the movie who's showing us someone who's not going to budge, who's been in the room, who's reading all the books that we're reading, who's met the people.
Mm-hmm.
So that means he's doing relationship. And that's the hardest step. And that's the step that most theologians don't do.
At all.
And so you need to, and throughout church history, we've seen a progression of our understanding of theology through relationship. And I think the Bible affords us, the text even affords us that opportunity to grow as we grow through our understanding, through science, through theology, and through relationship. So
Absolutely.
again, hopefully he'll just be a good example for even a parent who might be like, I can't even accept my gay child. Maybe Sal will
Right.
help that parent be like, all right, whoa. Let me look at this a little bit more. And the number one thing is to love your child,
Period.
So, yeah.
Absolutely. And I
I
think
don't
that
know if I
does.
answered the question. I went off on a couple different.
Oh no, you're fine. I think that shines through loud and clear that your father does have a profound love for you and that you have a profound love for him. And I think that really does come through. And if nothing else, like you just said, parents that may want to ostracize their children or throw their children out or throw them away. Or I had a young person on my last podcast write a letter that said that his father has told him, "My other son is dead to me," talking about him. And
Wow.
so perhaps seeing, and if he would see your father um, from that position, even though it's still side X, but at least love your child enough to support them enough to not throw them out to the wolves. It's a
Right.
hard world out here.
Oh
Everyone
yeah.
needs,
And that was one
yeah,
of the prime reasons I went back. I was lonely, it's hard. It's hard to see your family grow up, your sisters grow up, they have babies, there's weddings, and you're just the lone wolf out in the wilderness. And I was given a choice in that letter. My dad gave me a choice. He's like, you will decide whether you're going to follow the world or obey God. And what do you do when you're handed a 10-page letter that's mostly Bible verses
right,
that are damning you to hell? Uh,
yeah,
you run as fast as you can. So I think he's learned not to do that, and hopefully other parents will learn not to do that. There's other ways to engage in this dialogue. And you hit a really good note there. How do we get people in the room to see the movie? If we
yeah,
can just get people to come and see this film, uh, and let us walk with us on this journey of two Christians, one an ally and one a gay Christian who does have his master's of divinity at
hmm,
Talbot University. Um, and so he is studied and he loves the Lord. He's a gay Christian who struggled on his own, heard the 1946 thing, and he was like, what? And he started buying hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of Bibles and dictionaries and lexicons to start studying and doing this work because he
yeah,
found that incredibly hard to believe. Uh,
right,
and then Kathy is our ally Christian who started this journey and the research. She's an engineer, so she's able to do the history research. And again, her work is well cited. She got there through relationship. She
yes,
knew what the Bible said and what the pastors told her it said. And after being in relationship with a friend for 5 years and was like, well, I love my friend. Why wouldn't God love my friend? She started to think differently, look at it differently, and then really started to do the work. And her work goes beyond the text on the pages of the Bible, where she will look at human sexuality seen through multiple lenses throughout a 2,000-year period. So we get to look at this timeline through history of what's going on with sexuality in the church, in religion, in politics, in the military, in society, in psychology, in science, and how has it changed? Because first
right,
century sex is completely different than the sex that we understand today. And as she
absolutely,
said recently in a video that we posted, heterosexual sex isn't biblical sex. Like
nope,
these things have changed, and we need to be honest with it. So anyway, her work is super cool, and we'll get to meet her in the film. But yeah, I'm so grateful that I even have an opportunity to tell this story, because like I said, when I
yeah,
was sitting in that conference and I heard about this research, I know who I am. I know my experience as a gay person growing up in the church and understanding that these things that I was being taught never really resonated with me. And now
mhm,
there are people who are doing the work to actually provide the evidence to support what I was feeling. So I stopped everything that I was doing and quit my job and started buying cameras and begged Kathy and Ed to tell their story. Like, I need to tell this movie because Kathy and Ed's book is going to be fantastic. I would never
yes,
be able to write a book like that. I would never be able to do that kind of work, but that's okay because I can make a movie. And the
yeah,
movie hopefully will get out and be able to go beyond just however many people would buy the book, and hopefully more people will buy the book and people will see this movie all over the world in multiple languages, streaming, on a major platform. And we can
beautiful,
really get into people's living rooms and into the family situation and welcome people to have real, honest conversations around this historical, academic, relational, journalistic conversations that hopefully lead to real change in our society. So,
Yeah. And I really see this. And I mean, and I think the conservative church world sees this as well. I see this as changing our nation and our world. This is major. And not to disclose too much, but that mistranslation and the proof that it was in fact a mistranslation, that's life changing. It changes the whole narrative. And now it's going to be seen, it's going to be brought forward, it's going to, not just with the movie but also with the book, the text. It can't be ignored.
right.
And I think the conservative world is quaking, they're shaking in their boots. And honestly, we've seen a recent book come out already. The movie isn't even released. 1946, the movie does not have, as far as I know, a release date yet, does it?
We're
Not yet.
working on that. Hopefully, we'll be able to announce in the spring. We're working on that.
Beautiful. But not even a release date yet. And we already have a book that's been published and is out on Amazon now, trying to refute the book. Or not even the book, the movie.
Right.
What is it? By what's his name?
Edward
somebody.
Andrews. Yeah. Yeah.
How
He has 170 books published, supposedly. And, the first note in looking at that is you can't really do that many publications with any kind of academic integrity. And it's a lot of copy and paste and cut and paste. And he didn't even mention anything about Kathy's book or, it's just like 2 pages of the movie and then just copy and paste theology. Just to, we call it the profit over profits because it's just capitalizing on the name, honestly. And, those things don't bother us. It actually is going to help people to understand, to see this movie. And the thing that separates our film from like an apologetic film on the verses and things like that, which we do get into the different verses. We will look at more verses besides First Corinthians, because we look at how the word homosexual from the mistranslation was spread into multiple different passages and in different years. But our film is different because we look at the translation history, and it's something that is never talked about. It's never taught in any congregation. And it's something that people just don't even think about. You're just handed this Bible and here's the ESV. It's the evangelical approved Bible, Here's the NIV. And I was given the King James Bible. That was my first Bible when I'm old. I'm 45 this year. Oh,
we're about the same age.
right.
Still younger though. The 40 and over crew. Yay!
The 40 and over crew, right. So, we're just told, and even things like biblical inerrancy or being a Christian nation, these are all modern inventions around Christianity. And another thing I'd like to say about our movie is not an attack on anybody's faith. It's not an attack on Christianity. This is not an attack on God. It's also not an evangelist piece. We're following 2 Christians who wanted to ask the question, who made this decision and why? We lead it to a mistranslation that has then led to the creation of anti-gay theology, where we see for the first time in the 70s, when the translations in the late 70s into the early 80s start to become malice. Where at first it's a medical term, it's a technical term. We know why the translators made that decision in the 30s and printed it in 46. We know because Kathy and Ed went to see the publications that came out in the 70s. They went to all of the translation archives and looked at the Living Bible, the American Standard Bible, and the New International Version to see what they did in making that decision to put the word homosexual in now 6 different passages where it doesn't belong. And then by the 80s, what happens is the American Psychiatric Association declassifies homosexuality as being a mental illness. And so for the first time, the church had to step up and create a sin issue around homosexuality. And for the first time, they're using these verses against LGBTQ people because society no longer was taking care of the problem. Prior to that, it was a mental illness. We were criminal. It was criminal activity, And so once society caught up and said, whoa, homosexuality is just an orientation. This isn't abusive. This isn't exploitative. This isn't lustful. This isn't, devious. It's just an
Right.
orientation. And so as soon as society gave women and LGBTQ people their rights, and of course, African Americans and other
Mm-hmm.
people of color, the church comes in and creates these things like complementarianism to get
Mm-hmm.
a handle on men's roles and women's roles, And so Kathy, in part of her work, will show that we don't see pastors using these verses until the late 70s on an LGBTQ person as a sin issue. So they would
Right.
advise them to go see a medical a psychiatrist or something.
Right.
It's fascinating work. Her
It
work is
is.
fascinating. If y'all don't know Kathy Baldock, look her up. Canyon Walker Connections. She's on the TikTok now. She's on the Instagram. She's always been on the Facebook.
Yes, she has. And she is, and Twitter. Don't
Oh
forget
yeah, of
Twitter.
course, Twitter. I need to get on
Yep.
the Twitter.
Yeah, and she's dynamic and she does not hold her tongue. She is the ally. She's an accomplice. She's not even an ally. She is someone who stands right next to us and fights for us and gives voice to us when we just can't. She goes into spaces that we can't go into, that we would automatically be silenced from. And she gets thrown out from those spaces because she opens her mouth and she doesn't mind
Yeah.
telling the truth. So, yeah,
Yeah,
very thankful for her. So let's talk about it a little bit. There are two words in question here,
sure.
right? Arsenicoitai, malakos. What do those things mean?
Yeah, so
I didn't catch you like that. I should have
no,
waited. I should
that's
have.
totally fine. Yeah, so the arsenicoitai and malakoi, if I can say it right. Those are words that, of course, like most of us have never heard of before, And
Right.
so even just trying to describe those words in the movie, it's like, where do we go? How much do we talk about? How much do people even really care? But it comes down to these word debates because both sides are trying to be heard. And so one is creating an anti-gay theology that's so desperate to prove that arsenicoitai means homosexual. And the other side is, working academically with them to show that no, this is abusive, exploitative, kind of sex. So the malakoi is a little bit easier to define, and it literally means soft, but it could be turned into it's like being treated like a woman. It's not fitting in with society. It's excessive type things. So Kathy has a whole list of vices that you could fall under if you're a malakoi. You drink too much, you read too many books, you pine over people's wives, like you're lustful kind of thing. But really, being soft means you're not fitting into your role in Roman society as a male.
Mm.
And then another definition for it, another use for it is being the bottom in a male homosexual act.
Mm-hmm.
And the malakoi is taking the female position. So they're literally being penetrated. And that's why they're then called soft. So they're already, tainted or considered less than. They're
Right.
damaged goods because they've taken the role of a woman. And so that's the malakoi. And then the arsenicoitai would be the aggressor, the penetrator, the dominant, usually. And what is seen is in Roman society, there was a system called pederasty where there was a lower class man with a higher status man, and so it was never equal status type relationships, and that's not what they're talking about in First Corinthians.
Mm-hmm.
Another way to define it and what is evidence and going on in specifically in First Corinthians is this type of, because the word right before malakoi denotes a female prostitute, and the malakoi in this situation would be a male prostitute, and the
Mm-hmm.
arsenicoitai would be the penetrator. But in the case, they're using sex for money, exploitation. It's for it's an economic sin. And so don't
Hmm.
have sex for money, exploitation, whatever. But so it could be looked at and is looked at as prostitution, the Malakoi and the Arsenokoitai, but they're both participating. And that's why they're both condemned, because you're not supposed to have sex for money or sex for gain in society or to demean
Hmm.
or, um, those kinds of things. So we're going to get into that. We are going to define that stuff in the movie. We've got a Roman historian that's going to come in and talk about these things, and then also tell us where you can see these words, especially arsenokoitai, used in other literature, which it's
Hmm.
really only used in referencing the vice list that Paul created. So Paul
Right.
coins the word. We don't really see it used in other literature. And in the other literature it's used in the same way. And it always has these notes of exploitation and economic. And
Right.
so his name's Dr. Potter. He's going to be able to help us understand some of these things, which is really cool.
That
Um,
is.
yeah. So I know it's boring. I know way too much about Malakoi and Arsenokoitai. I never thought I would ever know any of these words ever.
Right. But, it's necessary because so many people have been held in bondage using, well, they've combined these words to make them homosexual. And so many people have been held in bondage and they don't know, nor they're aware of the Greek. They don't understand the culture and the context and how it does not apply to people like myself and you today, who are not engaging in any type of idolatry, any type, we just want a consensual, loving relationship between someone of our same sex, the same orientation. And that's not what the Bible's describing. Um,
Absolutely. Absolutely.
yeah, I
You
think
can
that's
see
important.
the the how the footnotes have changed too, and you made a good point. They combined those two words because that's exactly what the team did. They were like, well, there's the bottom and the top, and they're both agreeing on it. Because to them, that even though it was for economic use and for prostitution, they didn't understand that homosexuals that was an orientation. So they were
Right.
using the term in the 30s and combined the two words, and it was like, oh no, this is a homosexual. But in their minds, they were thinking vice. It wasn't until 40 years later that they caught up, and they caught up with the orientation thing. But the footnotes in the RSV, the reason why David, our young seminarian who wrote the letter, was even able to identify this is because the footnote said that homosexual was rendered from two Greek words, malakoi and arsenokoitai. So he was able to go back and write a 5-page, excuse me, 5-page academic letter showing him why he got this wrong. And the
Right.
letter was so good that he convinced Dr. Weigel to actually write back, which gives us the only proof in history showing us why they made this decision and why it wasn't correct. It's
Right.
incredible. Yeah.
Right. I
Sorry.
think that speaks to, it should speak to all of us about the power of one voice. If he had not written that letter, and had enough, wherewithal and sense and even bravery to stand up against what he was seeing and he knew was an injustice. And if he hadn't written that letter, there would be no movie and this thing it would just go on for an eternity.
You're
But he
right.
did,
And
he
you're
wrote the
right.
letter.
He wrote the letter, but he wrote the letter he wrote the letter with his first name, middle initial. And so Kathy and Ed were able to find this man, not only alive, but to, first of all, just find him, David S. So they had a P.O. box in Canada and David S. That's it. And a
Wow.
year. And then they assumed he was in seminary school because he was able to write the Greek in the letter. And they had some other assumptions about him, but he's a retired minister living in Canada. And they found him just through a woman named Tina who finds people. That's kind of what she does. She's a search angel. And she'll tell that story in the book, but that's a miracle within itself.
Absolutely.
Um, but if we did not have this letter, we would not be able to really engage in this conversation and I think get this idea to really penetrate the minds of the evangelical world, you know.
Yeah.
You
I
should
think
edit
this
that
is
out. I'm just kidding. I used that word on purpose because that's what we're talking about here. Penetration, procreation, and patriarchy. It's all tied together. So,
indeed. But I mean, God has to be in this. I believe it was God that inspired Reverend David to write the letter. And although the archives remained hidden, the terrible wrong that was done, and then what happened beyond that with now so many people, hundreds of thousands of us being literally, damned to hell by the evangelical church. At this time, it's being exposed. I mean, this is an awesome time to be alive. I'll say that it's an awesome time to be in this period of time, to see this and to be a part of this change.
yeah,
This is something that's going to, I truly believe, change a trajectory of what the Christian church looks like as far as LGBTQ people and inclusion in our churches. And that makes the world better for those of us that come after us, for the kids. That makes the world better for the young people that are LGBTQ now, that will later come out. And that's just a blessing, I think. I want to know how, and if you can tell our audience, how can we support you? Because this involves all of us, even if you have you don't care, and
yeah,
this is so important though, because
yeah.
the Bible has done a horrible, it's done damage. We need to reverse it.
Right, right. And we as humans have done damage with the Bible. And I would say the last thing that we missed about this mistranslation is the differences when you use a medical term like homosexual that shows that it's an orientation, you condemn a group of people versus an act that we will
Hmm.
learn is economic, exploitative, lustful, abusive, demeaning, rape type things, all of these different, and all of the other verses, not just the First Corinthians verse. If you look at the connection with all of the other verses and what's going on there, none of them are talking about same sex, loving, consensual, mutual acts. And
None.
so, I mean, even if we can get most of the people to lean from the side X to go to the side B camp, we're getting people to understand that the Bible does not condemn homosexuality, and there was a mistranslation. And
Hmm.
so, but finessing it so that we don't pull the rug out from under anyone. How
Yeah.
can you support us? So the best way to support us is please follow us on all social media platforms at 1946themovie.com and share the information, share the movie. We are still looking for our last leg of fundraising. We have gotten through development, production. We've done our filming. We've got just one more scene we're picking up in New York, and then we're done. We've gotten through our structure edit, as you know, because you've seen the movie. Now, and you'll know what's missing because you've seen the movie, we need to pay for and do our archival producing, buy and license clips that we need to purchase for the film, do our animation, our graphics, our color correction, our sound correction, add the credits, formatting for different platforms and hopefully for all over the world. That would then, we need to do subtitles. So if anybody did want to help us financially, our GoFundMe is still live, and you can find that on our website, 1946themovie.com. And then we also have a fiscal sponsor through Women Make Movies, which is also found on our website. And they are a 501c3, so they're able to accept charitable donations on our behalf. And then they get a percentage for helping us get the donation, which is great because their organization supports women filmmakers and amplifies women filmmakers. So that's fantastic. Other than that, we have merch. Merch is a great way to support as well. So our merch store is on the website. And just be patient and knowing that I'm one person trying to do this massive project and so many people have come to help. If you look at our donation page, we've got over 1,000 people from all over the world that have donated, whether it's $5 or $100 or $1,000. And it's just incredible. I can't wait to share those names at the end of the movie. And then we did just have a church come in to help us get through this last leg of production. They came in with 40% of our goal at a
Wow.
$50,000 donation. Yes. And so that's going to afford us to hire the list that I just went through. We're going to be able to do our archival, our license purchasing, and our animation. So that knocks down however many we're on that list, 10 to now 7. So
Right.
it's making it more possible for us to hit our goal. Our goal is to finish by this spring, to hopefully premiere at Tribeca. We submitted to Tribeca. We have to be able to finish in time. We have a lot of work to get there, but we're working hard every single day. And because of this gift, it makes it possible. And if I can say one more thing, I know that you've got a lot of time, but I wanted to also acknowledge the people that have given us services on top of just providing financial support, because we do have companies that have come in and saved us, because this is our movie, and the community that has supported us financially saved us tens of thousands of dollars, because we have a lawyer that's doing our legal for us.
Wow.
UCLA came in and they're doing our fair use pro bono. That's got to be a $40,000 line item. I can't even imagine how much that
Wow.
would cost for a team of lawyers to clear the movie so that we can purchase E&O insurance. We'll have to buy the insurance, but yay for not having to pay for that legal work. We have a company in Minnesota called Acalse, and they've been filming our interview segments all for credit. So the only thing that we have to pay for when they come out is lodging and food, the travel expenses. So that's incredible. And, like you said, it's a God thing. That's the only thing that I can attest to, because every single time it's like, oh, we ran out of money in December, but that's okay, because we are going to keep going. And we know it's just milestones and baby steps. And, now we have a movie to show. And so because we showed the movie, the church was like, no brainer, we're in, and because
Yeah.
they're in, hopefully we've got a couple other churches that might come in and be able to support and pay for the color correction and the sound design. So I'm just
This
really
is awesome.
grateful. That's it. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, this is awesome. That's dynamic. And so if
Yeah.
you're listening and you would like to support, you heard all the ways. I'm going to put this in the description. Everything that Rocky just said will be in the description of this podcast, so that you can go and click on the website and support in any way that you can. The very smallest thing is sharing and letting people know, get the word out that this movie is coming out, and that there are people that need to see it. As best you can, figure out ways that we can get the non-affirming community to take a look. Because if nothing else, they wouldn't you want to know? That's my question. If there was something wrong, if you were given misinformation, wouldn't you want to know, or would you prefer to stay ignorant? That's always my question. And so for me, I want to know, good or bad. I want to know so I can make an informed decision. So before we go, let's talk about touring. When the movie comes out, what can we expect? What are you guys going to be like, taking this everywhere? Is it going to be, I mean, you don't have to tell me everything, but what's the goal?
Yeah. The goal is definitely to get out into the community as much as possible. I'd love to go and watch the movie in faith communities or education communities, community centers, anywhere where people will benefit from learning this information and that we can be a part of. We would love to turn this into an impact campaign. I also know that with Kathy's book, I would imagine we could probably do some sort of workbook. And so I would love to talk with her to see what that looks like, something that we can then have the movie be a tool that people can use with their faith communities to lead them to becoming affirming spaces. So who knows? But yes, expect to see us out, and please invite us out. If you want us to come to your community, just send us an email. We'd love to hear from you.
That's awesome.
And
Are there
so we
any
should come visit
thoughts?
you.
What'd you say?
We need to come visit you.
Oh yeah, we already have that. I think the Tybee Coast Theater. I think we're good to go.
I
So
love
as soon as
it.
the movie comes out, yeah, we got you.
Good.
We're gonna work towards that. I've been talking to some folks. So Tybee Island, here we come. It's
I
right
love it.
across the bridge from us. So
Awesome.
yep. So any final thoughts? Anything that I missed that I didn't ask you that you were hoping I'd ask and that you could talk
No,
about?
I think this is great. Honestly, it was really awesome to be a part of your podcast, and I'm so, first of all, just so grateful for your voice on TikTok and being able to be an example And then now when I heard that you had a podcast, I was super excited. So I did call you and say, can you please put me on your show? So thank you for having me.
No, I'm appreciative that you did.
Yeah, for sure. No, this was fun. And we'll have to do it again. And like I said, we'll have to come out and be a part of your in-person community so we can actually hug each other again and, you know, and
Absolutely.
yeah, hopefully see the world change together, you know.
Absolutely. That's the goal. That's the goal. Well,
Yeah.
Rocky, I want to thank you so much for giving me your time. Thank you for the work that you are doing, this tireless work that you're doing for us. Because I really believe you might think you're doing it for you, but you're doing it for our future. There's so many people that have lost their lives over this word and over this mistranslation. And hopefully this will save some lives. That's
Let's
my
hope
prayer.
so. Yeah. Hey, if we can change one person's mind, then hey, we can't change my dad's mind, I'm sure, but there's somebody out there we can, you know.
Yeah. Well, at least keep them from being so harsh and so
Right,
mean.
exactly. Well,
Yeah.
thank you. I really appreciate you, and I'm sure I'll see you on the TikTok.
Absolutely.
Did you
Thank
enjoy
you.
this podcast episode?
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Want to hear more? Follow me on Facebook, Instagram, or TikTok. Also, don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel for awesome inspirational content. Don't forget to share this episode with your friends. As always, be blessed and be a blessing. I love you.